Hey you guys, I want to share a 5+10 blitz game with you just now because we're thinking a lot about tactics. Tactics is the #1 area of chess that's going to make a difference between you winning and losing. This game I'm playing against a player who's rated under 800, but they actually play a really good game of chess, and eventually it's decided by tactics. I want to take you through the thought processes. Okay, so we start with e4, and these days I'm playing the French against 1e4, so I play e6. My opponent brings his knight out and then d5. My opponent advances the e-pawn and I play c5, which is very standard, so this is the French advanced variation now, and d4 is played. So there's some tension here between these pawns. I don't want to capture at this point because it would advance my opponent's knight, so there's no real advantage to me doing that. Much better for me to leave the pawn there in the French. So I bring my knight out to c6, and now this is a slight mistake on my opponent's part, capturing the pawn. And why is it a mistake? Okay, so right now, after 4 moves, he's got 2 pawns in the center looking pretty good, okay? And I've only developed 1 piece. Now, after he captures, I recapture with my dark squared bishop, and he has basically allowed my bishop into the game. Here, with this pawn stuck there and this pawn here on g7, my bishop only really has 1 square to go to, okay? But he's now given me a slight advantage by capturing the pawn, which is music to my ears. Okay, now c3 is played. I guess the point of that move is to try and stop this knight from coming in, and I decide to play knight to h6. Now this is a standard idea in the French. The idea is that I want to move my knight round here. I could also have played this, but it's also tempting white to capture the knight, in which case I could recapture with my g-pawn, opening up the g-file maybe for a rook. White takes the bait and captures the knight, and I recapture. So I've got these ugly doubled isolated pawns now on the h-file. White now pressurizes my bishop, because clearly my bishop is now in quite a commanding diagonal looking down there at f2. So I retreat, and white now comes out and pins my knight. I break the pin with my light squared bishop. So far so good. White castles. Okay, clearly the queen side of the board is not an attractive place to put your king, so this is perfectly understandable. But it does mean that now my rook can start to bring some influence over the game. So rook to g8. Queen now advances, eyeing up this pawn on h6, and I've got a decision to make here. There's only a couple of things I could do. I could advance the pawn to protect it, which might help temporarily. Another idea is I could push my rook to g6. That's maybe not too bad, and then maybe ideas of moving my queen, castle, and bring my other rook behind my first rook. Maybe that's perfectly good. But if I move my rook to g6, then bishop coming back to d3 will kick my rook away, and the queen will win the pawn anyway, probably. I guess if bishop comes back, I do maybe have f5, and if takes en passant, I've got e takes f5. That's an idea. But I decide to kick his bishop anyway. So this is I'm responding to this threat with a counter-attack of my own, forcing the bishop to do something, and the bishop takes my knight, which is fine. Means I've got the bishop pair, and both of my bishops now are on the preferred side of the board, where they're going to be looking down towards my enemy's king. Okay, so I recapture with my bishop. Now there's threats of maybe this pawn pushing forwards, and this lovely bishop pair is going to be pretty strong. My opponent grabs the pawn. I would call this an unnecessary capture. Yes, it's material, but in fact losing these pawns off the h-file is probably not going to work against me, as we will see. So I now move my queen to e7, preparing to castle queenside. And white goes ahead and captures the other rook. I had time to move my queen because now I can castle, and I've connected my rooks. So the queen, this rook is safe here on g8 for the time being. White develops his last minor piece, and this is quite an important move because it's defending this knight. So clearly my threats are to push d4, and now if I capture the knight, the pawn can't recapture because it's pinned because of the rook. Okay, so he's paired his knights together so that if I capture the knight on f3, then his other knight can come in and recapture and maintain his position. I push ahead with d4 anyway, initiating the threat against the knight on f3, but I'm not going to take it yet. My idea is if I can capture this pawn, I'll kick this knight away from the defense of f3. This is another decent move by my opponent, pushing b5, and I thought about what I can do with my bishop, and then I realised actually a takes b5 is perfectly okay. Yes, it weakens my kingside. Yes, I've got doubled isolated pawns on the b file, but my intention here is to go in with a crushing attack. Pawn captures on d4. And now I can recapture that with my bishop because its only defender here, this knight, yes, it can recapture, but then I've got ideas of rook comes in, capturing on g2, or even bishop comes in on g2. So he doesn't recapture. I think material is more or less equal. I'm a pawn down at this point. Now the rook comes in to defend this knight. Okay. I now move my bishop, so I've now got two attackers on this knight. And you have to consider that this knight on f3 is not really a defender of it because it can't really move because of this double threat from my pieces over here. Okay. Now this is a bit of a mistake because it simply allows me to capture the d2 knight. I'm threatening this rook and really posing a problem for this knight here. The knight captures. Okay, so again my opponent is still a pawn up. His king looks in a way safer than my king. It's got some material around it, but my pieces are very threatening. Yeah, this bishop is actually pinned right now. It can't move because of this rook. However, if my rook goes in and captures on g2, the king cannot recapture. Even though this bishop's pinned, it's still there as a defender. So I go in with this attack. Now, here, this looks like it's going to be devastating. This capture is a forcing move. It comes with check, and the king only has one response, which is to move to h1. And now you can see my idea. I now remove the rook. This is very, very common when you've got like a rook and a bishop looking at a square near the king. You've got the option to capture, force a move, and then to move away with a discovered check. Now this looks like it's bound to win the queen and probably the game. However, my opponent comes up with a brilliant move. He thinks about it for a while, and now queen to e4. Queen to e4 takes his queen out of trouble there and breaks the check. He interposes the queen, and look, my bishop cannot capture because my bishop is pinned by this rook. Very, very good move. So now I move my queen across. I'm disappointed that I didn't win the queen, and now we have some interesting ideas. So what can happen now is the threat is that I capture the queen, and although my queen and king will then be in line with this rook, my capture comes with check, and that would be pretty devastating, partly because my rook is there on the g-file. So white is really forced to exchange here, and this is a blunder. This is a tactical blunder, right? Because look, let's think it through. Let's say he captures with the rook. Okay, I have then an option. I can capture with a pawn, so basically win a piece, or we've got rook takes, queen takes, x-raying the king through the queen, so we'd be forced to exchange queens, right? So either way, I've won a piece. However, going this way and capturing it with a queen first, he's thinking, oh, I'm going to recapture with a queen, then he recaptures with a rook, and then pawn takes, okay? But I don't have to do it in that sequence. I can just capture with a pawn, and he's just blundered his queen. The exchange doesn't have to map out in the way that you think. So that was a blunder. Okay, knight comes in, and now I move my king out of the way of that rook, which is a sensible move. I'm in a very commanding position now, although my time is running low. I've got 46 seconds right now. Knight comes in, clearly eyeing up a fork on a6, which would win my queen if I didn't do something. But now queen takes e5, counter-attacking the knight. Knight comes in with a check, but a bit of a pointless check because my king comes up threatening the knight. Knight moves with check, and now I move to a7. Right? Why a7? It's because I know that when you've got a piece that is diagonally 2 squares away from a knight, it's going to take that knight 4 moves to attack this piece, or 3 moves to attack it, right? So it would be something like there, and then it would be attacking that square, okay? If you're 1 square away diagonally, then there's a 1 move attack, right? But in this instance, I know that this is a safe square for my knight. The only attacking piece, sorry, for my king, the only piece that's attacking is this knight, and this knight, now I know, cannot cause my king any problems anytime soon. So now there's another mistake here from my opponent, because I think a better move would have been f3, putting the pawn here, and then therefore breaking this diagonal and removing check threats, okay? Because now I can simply move across, and this is now a forcing sequence that wins the game, okay? So white is in check. My rook is there guarding the entire g-file, so the king has no squares to go to. All white can do is put a piece in the way. And he's got 2 options, rook to there or knight to there. And neither is effective because they both just get recaptured by the queen, and both with check, and that's checkmate in the end. So lovely little game, really, really nice move to get out of the discovered attack on the queen with check by my opponent. Unfortunately, he blundered the exchange later on in the game, and that led to a pretty crushing win in the end for me. So hope you've enjoyed it. There you go. Have fun with the French. I am definitely having a lot of fun with this opening. I'll see you next time.